All right, so today's lesson, we're going to be completing the square, and again, it's a 2-day lesson. So today's essential question is, how can I solve quadratic equations by using square roots and by completing the square?
So what you're going to come across with, we're still solving quadratic equations, meaning we're finding the roots, the x-intercepts, and we're also finding the zeros. Remember, it means the same thing. Sometimes you're going to come across problems that truly cannot be factored. And we will let you know, because on the test we will say, please use the square root method, please factor. This is just another method. That's all this is right now.
Okay.
And what we're doing is right now we're using the square root method. That's what we're demonstrating. So when you use the square root method, you need the x squared term all by itself on one side. So what are you going to do with the 11 then?
So I'm going to subtract 11 from both sides.
Yes.
So I get 4x squared equals 48.
Yep.
Okay.
And now you need,
Are we just
like I said,
solving it?
well, you need the x squared all by itself.
Okay, so let's divide everything by 4. So we get x squared
equals 12. Well, what do? You have an x squared equals 12. What do you do to find x? You take the
root
of each side. And now, whenever you take the square root of a square, you get two answers, a plus or minus.
Positive and a negative.
Right. And the plus or minus doesn't go there, though, so let's erase.
It'll go here.
Yes, it's
I
going
just didn't have room.
That's okay.
Well, I usually do it here and here. And then they just go away. So we're left with x equals
plus or minus the square root of 12.
I don't know what that is. Do you?
Well, what we're going to do, we have to break that up into 4.
Oh, yeah, because we can break it up
Yep.
into one.
So do your tree branch. Do your tree branch. The
So
square root of 4 times the square root of 3.
Which is then, we get 2 root 3.
And it's
but
plus
it's
or
plus
minus.
or minus.
And that's your
And
answer.
that's our x.
Because notice, and we'll highlight that, notice on the prior lessons, we got 2 answers usually, remember?
Yep.
And you're going to get 2 answers because it's a quadratic function that has
so
an
it
x
has
squared.
to touch at 2 points on the
Right.
graph.
And sometimes when the answer is the same, that's a double root. Remember that?
Yep.
Okay, so we're not going to do this one until class. And now we're going to talk about completing the square.
Okay.
That is another method. Again, we've used factoring, we've used the square root method, and now we're going to use completing the square.
Okay.
When something cannot be factored, we have to use this method.
And we'll tell you.
We will tell you
completing the square.
exactly.
Okay.
So this is what you do with completing the square. You have to get used to doing it. What you have to do is you have to get always the variables on one side and the constants on another.
Okay, so whole numbers go on one side.
Yep.
X's, Y's on the other. Okay.
Right. And then what we're doing is we're adding b over 2 squared to each side.
So the b is the number in front of the x.
Right.
By itself. Got it.
Right, so let's just practice right now. Let's not complete the square. We're just going to practice what this b over 2 means.
Okay.
So what is b in that first?
B is negative 14.
Right, so we'll write b equals negative 14. And then what's b over 2?
Negative 14 over 2
Is negative 7. So what we're adding to each side is that squared, which is?
49.
And that's what goes there. Maybe circle it so they know that's what we were trying to find.
Okay.
Let's try the next one.
Okay.
So b is equal to 4. And now,
I started to
That's
just do
all
it
right.
on my own.
and now you have to take.
Can we just do this?
Yeah. Sure.
And then squared? So we're not doing all this extra side work?
Why?
Because that confuses me sometimes.
Why not?
Perfect.
Let's
4
do it.
divided by 2 is 2. 2 squared is 4.
Right.
So I need to add
As
4.
long as they know that that's not changing the x value in the original equation.
Right. That stays.
That would be my only concern.
Okay.
You're not changing that. You're just figuring out what you're adding.
You gotta add
Yep.
on later. Okay.
Okay. Now, we're going to do these in class,
Yep.
or you can practice them on your own. Here are steps for completing the square, which are also on the next page. And I think we're going to go through this example.
Yes.
So let's do that one at a time.
Okay.
Let's follow the steps. Number 1, collect the variable terms on one side and the constants on the other.
Okay, so I'm going to subtract 12x, so I get all my x's on
Yep.
the left. So I have x squared minus 12x equals
negative 20. Now, typically what I do on completing the squared, Miss Boyd, we might want to do it now.
Sure.
I always leave room behind the x term
Oh,
because we have to add, remember?
that's right. Add
So
something to
maybe
both
make a
sides.
little more space. And usually what I do, I right away at this step, I write a plus sign after the negative 12x and a line underneath it to show that I'm,
Add
yep, and then to the other side, plus
Add something
to reminds me right
Got
away.
it.
So now, well, b is equal to negative 12
Negative 12.
and
So then we'll do negative 12 over 2.
is negative, it's squared, sure.
So negative 12 over 2 is
Negative 6 squared
Negative
is
6 is
36. That's what we're adding to both sides.
Add 36
And
add a
36. Now look what we have. We've just developed a trinomial on the left-hand side that we can factor.
Oh,
So
nice.
now we want to write, so now we've kind of made it into a function that we can factor.
Okay.
We're kind of using completing the square and factoring at the same
So we
time.
got to factor 36.
Mhm.
What
9 and 4.
multiplies to give us 12.
So let's try 9 and 4.
No,
Let's try 6 and
6.
6.
Ooh, that'll work.
Yep, so that's going to be it.
So we're going to use 6 and 6.
Right. So we're going to, there we go.
All right.
Correct. So it's going to be
X,
x minus 6
Yes.
and x
minus
minus 6.
6.
And I will promise you right
Negative,
now,
negative.
when you're completing the square, this step should be the easiest step of the problem because your binomial that you wrote there, x minus 6, x minus 6,
Mhm.
that's always going to be the same. It's always going to be
Oh,
x
that
minus
makes
something,
sense.
x minus something.
Yeah.
And I want to just make you aware of that.
Okay.
Now on the right-hand side equals 16,
Yeah.
right?
we
And
just
negative
combine
20
them.
plus 36.
Yeah.
Well, what is x minus 6 times x minus 6? We can write that as a binomial squared, which
yeah.
is x minus 6 squared equals 16.
Oh. 'cause
Right, so I'm going to do
now-
one thing because I've kind of ignored my steps, so I want to
Okay.
make sure. We did this.
Yep.
Ooh, one thing I didn't emphasize, if there would have been a number in front of the
instead of
x
x
squared, we have to divide both
Everything.
sides by your a value so that it turns to 1. Your a value turns
Got
to
it.
1.
This time we didn't have to.
No. And
Okay.
then we added b over 2 squared to both sides. We factored.
Mhm.
Now look at step 5.
Yeah.
We're going to take the square
Square
root.
root of
So
both
look at,
sides.
we're using all these methods,
Nice.
completing the square, factoring, and square root.
So now if I square root here
Right.
and I square root here, that cancels.
Right? X
And then
minus 6
x
comes
minus
out,
6 equals
plus or minus
minus
4. What this is going to create right now are two equations.
Yes.
So I want you to write x minus 6
x minus 6
equals 4
and
and x minus 6 equals negative 4. And I'm going to scroll down so you have some room here,
Sure.
and let's solve those.
So I'm going to add 6.
Right?
Add 6. I get x equals 10.
Right.
And then I'm going to
Add
add 6, add 6, and I
Right.
get x equals 2.
Exactly. So guess
And
what?
Those are our answers.
We're done.
Nice.
So
All right.
now I think that's it for that page. This is going to be done in class. And the video questions for
That was in class.
class, sorry. And then the video questions, solve the equation by using square roots.
Okay,
Use
so
the
you have
square
to use
root
square root.
method. Number 2, solve the equation by completing the square.
Okay.
And that is it for today. We will see you tomorrow.